how are you doing? You know, most of the time the videos I have on YouTube anyway are how to make things. I thought I'd do what I used to like to do a lot, was teach Sunday school class. Now that's something I missed over the years. The church has decided to eliminate at least adult Sunday school classes, and they went from that to having home Bible study groups, which I belong to that, and that's a great thing. But that was kind of like the best part of Sunday for me, was a Sunday school class, because you got together with your friends, you got to share from the scriptures, feed back and forth. Also, when you had prayer time, you got to pray for specific things for each person there and their praises. So I missed that. So anyway, I'm going to do a Sunday school class, and I'm going to do it on the 4th chapter of the book of Daniel. Now, I'm picking Daniel because that's one of my favorite books. Way back, after I got back from Vietnam, I was in a college Sunday school class, and the teacher was Dr. Solomon, a medical doctor, and he just taught the book of Daniel in such a way that it really excited me and got me digging into it even more. And it's always been a favorite book of mine. So anyway, we're going to do a book of Daniel. I'm going to do chapter 4. So why chapter 4? Because of all the books of the Bible, here we have a time when a king, a non-believer pagan king, writes his testimony, how he went from that to becoming a believer in chapter 4. So stay tuned. A little something about time frame. It was around 600 AD. It was in 606 that Babylonian power came in and conquered Jerusalem and took back many of the people as captives. In chapter 1, it covers how Daniel and his friends were a part of a group of young people that were selected for a 3-year training period that the Babylonians were going to teach them their language, their customs, how they do things, to be couriers at the end of this 3-year course, that they would take information that from the Babylonians and pass it down to the captive Israelis, thinking maybe, they would accept it better from their own people than from the people who conquered them. The qualification for these guys, verse 4, chapter 1, young men without any physical defects, handsome, showing attitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. Now, part of their training, they were given the king's palace food. Same thing the king was eating, they were given. And a lot of that defiled their standards for what kind of food and stuff they could eat. Daniel and his friends asked the person who was in charge of them, is it okay if we just eat our own diet? And the guy wasn't too happy about that, because if they were looking less physically appearance to the king than the rest of them, and he found out that they were eating something different, he would lose his head. He wasn't in favor of that. Daniel said, how about just giving us a 10-day try? What could go wrong? Give us 10 days and make a decision there. See if there's any difference in us. I'm thinking the guard's thinking, what can happen in 10 days? People don't gain or lose that much weight in 10 days, but let's give it a shot. After the 10 days, there was a remarkable difference between him and the rest of the people who didn't do it. The servant allowed them to continue on that diet. At the end of the 3 years, when they went before the king, here's what the king said. In every manner of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians, enchanters in the whole kingdom. So they were put into their positions of couriers. And since they were shown to be even wiser than all the magicians and enchanters and wise men, they were put into that group. Now, chapter 2 goes into the big dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. And it was a dream about all the future things that were going to happen. And he called in all his wise people. And he asked them to tell me what the dream means. They said, well, tell us the dream. And he didn't fall for that, because he knows they could have told him any interpretation. So he told, no, you tell me what the dream was and what it means. Oh, we can't, nobody could do that. He was going to have them all killed. He was mad. And it's because Daniel and his friends were involved with that group, they were going to be executed too. And so Daniel was able to get a meeting with the king and say, let me hear your dream. And God revealed to Daniel, got a meeting with the king, and was able to tell the king what his dream was and interpret it for him. And the king was so impressed that at the end of chapter 2, then the king placed Daniel in high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. So this leads us into chapter 3, which all of you probably learned in Sunday school or know the story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refusing to bow down to this gigantic statue that was made of gold honoring King Nebuchadnezzar. And all the kingdom at a certain time was supposed to bow down, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't. For some reason or other, Daniel's not mentioned in chapter 3. Who knows why? So if you remember in chapter 2, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were put into high positions. That couldn't have gone over too well with the Babylonians who captured them and now were under their authority. So they were probably always watching, waiting for them to make a mistake to bring to the king. And this time it happened. As they did not bow down, they immediately went and told the king. Those three people did not bow down. King called them in. He respected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, gave them another chance, said, here, go bow down. And they still refused to do it. And that just angered the king so much that he made the furnace 7 times hotter than it was. And as they were throwing in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the guards throwing them in instantly burst into flames. That's how hot the fire was. Then the king looked into the furnace and saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walking around without being burnt, with a 4th image that looked like a god, son of God. The king called Shadrach, Meshach out. They came out, not a hair was burnt. Nothing smelled like burnt clothes. And the king was so impressed that God spared them. This is what he said at the end of chapter 3. Therefore I decree that the people of any nations or languages who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses to be turned into a pile of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province in Babylon. So they even got more power. That's the last we hear of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for the rest of the book of Daniel, but they sure made an impact up to that point. Now we come to chapter 4. Now, like I said, it is written by King Nebuchadnezzar himself. Let's get into it. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the nations and people of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs! How mighty his wonders! His kingdom is eternal kingdom. His dominance endures from generation to generation. Now listen, verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, like I said, he's writing this, was at home in my palace, content and prosperous. Now, just a little bit about Babylon. It was a city that was the modern day city of its time. It had walls around the city, which was something like 20 miles square, 20 miles going this way, 20 miles going that way, all around the city. One historian, Hiddocus, I think his name was, said that the walls were 300 feet tall, 80 feet thick, and 30 feet deep. So you couldn't dig under it. You could drive 4 chariots abreast on top of it. Modern day scientists who do their archaeological digs have said that you probably could take 1/4 of everything. He says less. But even at that, that was still a mighty wall all around the city. Plus it had a moat in front of the wall. So if you got past the moat, you got over the wall, then you had a space of a football field, and you had another great wall. So most likely he was never going to be conquered. And at that time, he conquered all the known armies of the time. He was content, and he was prosperous from all the goods he brought back to Babylon. It also had the Euphrates River running right through the middle of the city, and they had ferries to take people back and forth. They had a 100-foot drawbridge that went over. There was an underground tunnel 12 feet high and 15 feet wide that went under the river. Just a marvel time of what they were able to do. So he was very content, very prosperous. So verse 5, I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in bed, the image and visions had passed through my mind, terrified me. Now I'm sure we all had dreams where we wake up in the middle of the night and we were just terrified of what that dream meant, or it terrified us, and we were trying to interpret right away what the dream meant. Well, here the king had all kinds of people that could help him out. As I was lying in bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. Verse 6, so I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. When the magicians, enchanters, the astrologers, diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Now remember, in chapter 2, Daniel went to the king and interpreted his dream for him. And the king put him in charge of all these people. He was the head person. But he had all of them come in first, whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe God wanted us to see that man could not interpret this dream. It had to be a divine person like Daniel. So verse 8, finally Daniel comes into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods in him. I said, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Now remember that he's interpreted at least the one dream. He might have done, I don't know how much time has gone from chapter 2 to chapter 4. He's probably interpreted other dreams for him. So he knows that he has a 100% track record. So he's building them up. Verse 10, these are the visions I saw while lying in bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew larger and stronger, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruits abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From every creature was fed. Verse 13. In the vision I saw while lying in bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and shatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the planets of the earth. Let his mind be changed that of a man, and let he be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass for him. The decision is announced by a messenger. The Holy One declares the verdict, so the living may know the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets them over the lowliest people. This is the dream that I, Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means, for none of the wise men in my kingdom can interpret it for me, but you can, because you have the spirit of the holy gods in you. Nothing like having pressure on you. Obviously, Daniel knows what the dream, God reveals to him what the dream means instantly. Verse 19, then Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. Think about it. Most people in the ancient world and even modern times don't come to a king and tell him bad news. That is not good. Thinking of modern days, like the president of North Korea. He has all these advisors around him, and I bet you no one ever tells him the truth about how his army could get wiped out by our army if he does this, because they know they'll be eliminated. So I think this is how Daniel is thinking for a second. He's a little perplexed, and the king probably was able to see this by, we read on here, the king said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you. Belteshazzar answered, my lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. I think there was a very good relation between Daniel and King Nebuchadnezzar. They, like I said, I don't know how much time has passed, but he'd probably seen whatever Daniel did, he did make more prosperous for the king, interpret his dreams along the way. So I think he had a very good relationship. And that's why he's saying that I just wish this was on your enemies and not on you. Verse 20. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its tops touching the sky, visible for the whole world, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your Majesty, you are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky. Your dominance extends to distant parts of the earth. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven, saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze. In the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times pass for him. This is the interpretation, Your Majesty. This is the decree the Most High has issued against my Lord, King. You will be driven away from the people. You will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by you, for until you acknowledge that the Most High is your sovereign over all the earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump in the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, Your Majesty, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be then that your prosperity will continue. Well, Daniel gives them what might work, but apparently the king did not adhere to it as a year goes by, as we pick up in verse 28. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, is this not the great Babylon I had built as a royal residence, my mighty power and glory of my majesty? This makes me think of an incident that happened with Richard Nixon. If you remember, there was a lot of protesting going on in the Vietnam War. People were protesting in front of the White House all the time. Nixon finally ended the war, brought home the POWs, and had a big ceremony at the White House for all the POWs. I remember watching that, and I could almost see this, like Nebuchadnezzar is experiencing how mighty and power his majesty was, that he was probably thinking all that stuff was behind him, everything was good ahead, but he didn't realize that something terrible was about to happen to his presidency not too far down the line. Verse 31, even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms of the earth and gives to anyone he wishes. Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from the people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of the earth and his nails like the claw of the bird. So everything happened to Nebuchadnezzar that was revealed in a dream. This was a 7-year period. Time is 7 is a year. So 7 years go by. His hair grows extremely long. His fingernails extremely like claws. He's probably naked. His mind is no longer the mind of a man. He's thinking like an animal. So he's probably crawling around on all fours. He's eating the grass. He's probably out in the fields. It must have been something, that 7-year period in Babylon, knowing their king had turned into an animal. Who was running it? I have no idea. Maybe Daniel was. I have no idea. Verse 34. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanctity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominance is eternal dominance. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand. No one can say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time that my sanctity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out. I was restored to my throne, became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride is able to be humbled. So there you have it. A pagan king changes, is converted, gives his testimony of how that conversion takes place. I think that's encouraging to all of us, that if a king with that kind of power, that kind of might, that kind of wealth, that kind of knowledge, having all those people around him to give him wisdom and stuff, can find God, we can too. Just as Paul on a road to Damascus God converted him instantly, going from killing and stalking out believers to becoming the most prominent spokesman for the church. God is with us even today in the trials that are all going on. We shouldn't be alarmed and scared. We should be trusting God is in charge. He will get us through this time. He has taken the church out of the church building and sent us out into the fields to be harvesting the crop that is out there. Let's take advantage of that time. I hope you enjoyed this book of Daniel. Like I said, it's my favorite. Enjoy your time of being a light for God. God bless all you. So long.